Welcome back to the Fantasy Take TV podcast. You're on once again for the first time with Chizo. With me this afternoon, I've got JD, Eno, and Pistol. And we're going to be talking a little bit of draft, a little bit of mid-pricer rankings, maybe a little bit of banter in between. I'm going to introduce my guests. We've got JD, mate. How are you, champion?
I'm very good, thanks. A little bit disappointed that JB has invented some disease called COVID to dodge me. I mean, I drafted Butters in one draft with him, and all of a sudden he can't do podcasts with me anymore. This is a bit ridiculous. I thought we had like that, JB, JD acronym thing going on, but guess not. That's a bit disappointed, a bit flat about that.
You see it as a friend, he sees it as competition. That's just how he rolls, mate. Like he's been building up to having COVID this week just to make sure he can watch the entire first round. So he's not getting out of it at this stage.
Yeah, no, but in all seriousness, hope he's feeling better.
Yeah. And I talked to us, mate. You got your Lynx Africa on. You're smelling good, feeling good, drafting good.
You spotted that behind me. So, I'm actually out, mate. I need some more. I like how JD is trying to get in that he's now part of the expert crew any chance he gets. So, we understand, mate. But, really keen, boys. Footy starts in 2 days. So, really, really looking forward to it.
Pistol, you're plugged into the mainframe. You've got your charging ports there we can see. How are you?
I'm good. I liked how you said this afternoon, just because, up in the far north Queensland, you're like, you're 6 hours behind us or something?
It's sunny all day round, mate. It's like being in the Antarctic. It's just pure sun.
Put on your glasses, I think. There's a little bit of glare coming through your windows.
Don't tempt me. Good to hear. Boys, what are we doing tonight?
Whatever you want. You're the host. We got to follow.
I've been given 20 minutes notice, and I'm excited to be here, but I'm looking for a little bit of feedback here, lads. What's the plan?
Yeah, so for listeners that tuning in, Chizo and I had none of the planning, none of the input to this, and every time we ask what's happening, Eno and Pistol just give us blank looks, like this is going nowhere in a hurry. I think we're going to talk some team structures, some templates.
Yep.
We're looking for some nods, some confirmation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good plan, boys. We've compiled a template each based on our sort of communities here. Do we want to start off with your template first and maybe a little bit of the reasoning behind why we're seeing it? There's some minor differences between the two, but I think they're also important in particular lines why two really, really passionate SuperCoach communities can differ so strongly in some important points. So why don't you start us with the defense line and tell us why you're starting where you are?
Sure, yeah. So we, I guess, wanted to do something a little bit different to make sure the structures were a little bit different. Oh, the visual comedy is not going to go well on the podcast, but this is great. I'm loving it. Thanks, boys. So this is, I guess, like if the defender rookies do kind of come up, can you go a little bit deeper in the midfield and a little bit lighter down back? So in defense, we've got Ridley, Short, Whitfield, and Hewitt. And I'll pause there for any thoughts or concerns from the Dr. SuperCoach boys?
I mean,
do you want to take it?
Yeah, concerns. Well, I've got a couple of questions. We won't call them concerns just yet, obviously, because we've got our, thoughts about it. But I want to point out Hewitt at D4 as well as Gibcus on field. I'm wondering if Eno, as a Tigers fan, if you provide some sort of insight for the decision on Gibcus.
Look, JD put this together. I think Gibcus would be on the bench in this instance. No, I definitely have McCartan on
It's for the predicted points. Come on, we all do it. We all do it.
As soon as something goes wrong, I think that was JD's call. No, it's just the most expensive players on the field looks nice, all right? That's it.
Yeah. So I think, you'd have McCartan on field there. But Hewitt, I think JD and a lot of the other Discord members were really hot on him way before I'd seen him play this preseason. And then after the 2 games he put together in the engine room for Carlton, I was jumping on board. He was really clean around the contest. He had almost 30 touches, I think, in both games. Obviously, concerns maybe Walsh out, when he comes back, the midfield minutes might drop, but I think he's still in the clear, top 4 midfielders for them, and they got him across for a reason. So I think he obviously presents value. Whether he's, top 6 to 8 at the end of the year is probably the question everyone has around him. But for me, with the cash we need elsewhere this season, I think he's almost a no-brainer just for me because of how much you sort of save from a primo with him.
So he's been, the fourth midfielder before for Sydney. There's a stark difference between when he was the second CBA attendee compared to the fourth CBA attendee. Made a massive difference in his scores. Obviously, as you would predict, the further up the ladder and rung he scored much better. Scoring really suffered when he was the fourth in line as a midfielder for the Swannies. Do you think that's maybe a team difference for Carlton, or are you expecting him to, you're expecting to trade him out, kind of at a peak price before he gets to his buy? Or how do you expect to play it with Hewitt?
So I would contest that he's fourth in line, and this is a little bit controversial, but I don't think Chera's ahead of him, definitely not as an inside mid. I think they're obviously both going to go through the midfield a lot, but I would have Hewitt ahead of him. I think the big difference between at the Blues versus at the Swans is, by all reports and from what we've seen so far, they're going to let him off the chain and actually go head-to-head in contests rather than doing defensive or stopping duties at a lot of stoppages. And I think that's where the upside comes from, because when he has had games like that in the past, he's averaged in the high 90s or even low 100s. But when you do have those games where he's been given the tagging or defensive roles, his CBA still look good, but he hasn't scored as well. So I think that's where the big difference comes from. Obviously, Walsh being out at the start of the year helps a little bit, but then he's going to come back relatively early, and how that plays out is yet to be seen. But yeah, I would have him ahead of Chera in their rotations. I think he also adds something different that the other three don't have when it comes to the defensive side of his game. And I think the thing that surprised me most during the preseason was how clean he was. I actually rate his disposal ahead of Chera's, ahead of Cripps. It's probably only behind, well, it's definitely behind Walsh, but yeah, would have him second in that regard as well. So I think there is a lot of upside for him in that midfield, where he is being used in a way that is a little bit more SuperCoach friendly than what we saw at the Swans.
So you're not expecting to trade him out. You're picking him as a dead set keeper for the season.
It's one of those ones where, like, I think he probably ends up in the 6 to 10 range. And if he ends up around that point, you don't have to trade him out. He's a luxury last upgrade. Yep. And you obviously don't want too many of those in the team. Like, I wouldn't be starting him and Sicily, for example, because they're both in the same boat. Yep. So it is one of those where he could potentially be a keeper, or you maybe trade him out depending on what's happening. And of course, if you see CBAs going backwards or him tagging, then it's going to be a disaster. But I just think that's not likely.
Interesting. All right, cool. And I assume, I know you're making a joke about Gibcus, but do you think he can average as a defender rookie? Because obviously an inflated price, 171K, is not like super appealing. So how do you see his scoring potential?
Yeah, it's not great, I'll be honest. Like 50 for me would be absolute, probably best case scenario. Like he might, he might put out a really good game just out of pure luck and intercept everything coming his way one game. But yeah, he's not in this team, or no one's picking him for his scoring potential. It's just that I'm pretty sure he's got good job security. The slight issues around maybe Vlosten misses, and then you don't really know how good it really is if there's a couple of guys missing. But I think you're just picking him because, I mean, who the hell else is there? Like, we're trying to rely. Maybe Josh Singh gets named. He's not in this team. We got Hinge here, whose shoulder's fallen off, and Paddy McCartan, who looks really strong, and then DeConning, who I've seen some Cats fans not have him anywhere near the 22, just because you don't know what Chris Scott's going to do. So Gibcus is only there, and just because there really is not much else to pick from.
Yeah, I think it is a structure where it would really benefit from having Sin being named in round one, and then you could drop Gibcus altogether, who I think you're calling out the right things, Pistol. Like, job security is probably okay, but scoring potential's pretty average, and it's hard to see him returning 150K kind of at that elevated starting price.
Yeah,
love it.
If I can step in for a moment, I think it does. It gives you two things. It gives a flexibility coming into the team lists. Like if you've got a Nick Martin in the forward line, and then he isn't named, and you've got to find 25K, you've got to find money to do something with it. I think the difference with Gibcus is, worst case scenario, we don't get the people named. He's going to be playing. I don't necessarily subscribe to the theory that he's competing with Vlosten. I think that's probably more along the Hugo route than it is with Gibcus. They're not necessarily dissimilar, but they're not playing the same role for the Tigers, I don't think. So if Sin is named, it's a really easy switch to bring in someone like that. But at this point in time, with such low confidence in the defensive rookies being named, that's what you're paying for. It's all well and good to say he's not going to make 150K, scoring 40s. But neither is the 10 other guys that aren't even playing. So I would take 100K over nothing.
I'm going to throw a quick question out at JD because I feel like you can handle the pressure of this question.
Yep.
Let's say all 4 of those defender rookies are named, and then Jordan Boyd is named 123K defender. I guess you can give me your answer with or without Doherty in the side. I mean, or both. Can't be both, but you know what I mean. Are you dropping Gibcus for Boyd?
So if Doherty's name,
He has been. It's on Twitter 14 minutes ago.
Doherty's
there we
going to
go.
be playing round 1.
Playing round 1 by Michael Voss.
Oh,
And is
breaking news,
Boyd
Cheezo.
named? What else has Voss revealed to us?
No, it's just the only important thing is that clickbait. Sam Doherty playing for Carlton in round 1 following second cancer battle, according to Michael Voss.
How is that clickbait?
Well, no, they're not going to put out an article about Jordan Boyd.
Oh, right. I mean, yeah,
It's a feel good story that they want people to click on and read the
All right,
news.
so Doherty's playing, and now Boyd is named. Are you taking him over Gibcus?
I don't think so. I think Boyd's job security is less, and his scoring potential is probably even worse than Gibcus. So at the 48K difference that you have in price between the two, I'd probably still rather have Gibcus unless it really let you do something fun with your structure. But no, I can't imagine that I would take Boyd over Gibcus. Could you see yourself doing that, Pistol?
I mean, I've actively structured my side to avoid having to take Gibcus into round 1. So
hypothetically,
the answer is probably yes.
Boyd or Gibcus. You'd take Boyd over Gibcus?
I probably would. I think if he's named next to Doherty, I think he'll be in the side for as long as he plays. And I don't really see that to be any different than Sin. Obviously, he's just a better footballer, but the competition is stronger on the fringe of Port Adelaide's 22 as well. So if they're both going to be needing to play every game to be named, then I'm taking Boyd, who, to be honest, like he hasn't had great SuperCoach scores, but he's played decently besides a couple of turnovers at the beginning of both matches. So I could see him playing as a small defender in that Carlton side for until he has a bad game, and that's an extra 50K that you could use to free up potentially getting rid of Hewitt out of your side or something like that.
What? No. There's no way that's happening. All right. Well, I think that's pretty good.
Sicily?
No, there's no way that's happening. That's a shocking thing. Sorry. I hope we don't see Sicily next. So just to recap the defense, and we'll move on to the midfield. So Ridley, Short, Whitfield, and George Hewitt as the 3.5 primos. I'm going to concede some room for you there, Pistol. And then Hinge, Gibcus, McCartan, and De Koning as the 4 rookie or cheaper price defenders. In the midfield, we've then got McRae, Steele, Touk-Miller, and Neil as the 4 primos here. And that is the beauty of this structure, is that you can add in 3 of those real big gun premiums. You must be pretty happy looking at that, at least, Pistol, even if there is a George Hewitt or 2 in the side.
No, the midfield looks fantastic. I mean, it's pretty much if I had infinite budget and then still obviously had rookie issues, that midfield is a midfield I would take into round 1.
Perfect. And then I guess the bigger mission here is no Rowell, which is how we've fit in all of these. But we do have Berry, Horne-Francis, Dacos, Ward, Dylan Stevens, McDonald, and Hoff to finish off the rookie or cheaper price players.
I assume it's just there's no spots for Rowell rather than you don't want Rowell. Is that right?
Yeah, Rowell's in my personal team, and I've been on him pretty big all preseason. It's just to fit this structure that he's been omitted. And I guess the interesting part of the discussion here is do you see Rowell making enough money or potentially being a keeper and therefore being a must-have? Or is there a world where he's just like one of the better mid prices and you could maybe omit him if structure permits?
Well, he only needs to average 91 to make 150K. So I would say he's going to probably, unless injury happens, he's probably going to do that in a canter. If he doesn't become a top 8 premium or top 10 premium or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter if you're able to then still trade him out at his buy at 150K profit. So you can use him as a stepping stone. You can use him depending on how he scores, you could potentially use him as a keeper. I think you've just got that. It's a pick with a lot of flexibility behind it, which is very appealing.
Yeah, and I think we saw a lot of the teams at the top end. So I think SuperCoach Mama, for example, had Taranto, which wasn't exactly a great mid-price pick, but was one that sat at M8 through pretty much the whole year because there just wasn't opportunity to trade them out. And I could see Rao kind of doing the same, where they does get to like a mid 105 type range. And even though he's not an ideal keeper, it's like one of the last upgrades you do in your team, and well and truly makes over 200k.
She'll want me to correct you there because she was very anti-Taranto towards the end, was driving her nuts, trading him out at the last buy round, I believe it was, to upgrade him. And if she'd kept him another month, he went on the average, I think it was 61 in that month. And she would have not won SuperCoach if she had held on to Taranto for the whole season. So
the good correction, good shout.
I think the timing is important, I guess, with a Taranto type player because of volatility of his scores. Raul, you're hoping would be a bit consistent just because of his play style. It also happens in more breaking news. I'm not sure if you've seen it. There's been a lot of breaking news on this podcast. He said on Fox Footy 20 minutes ago or so that he suffered from OP.
Osteopubis.
Osteopubis last season that's now cleared up. So another, I guess, I'm not sure if it makes him extremely injury prone or if it like makes you feel better that he's past it and now he's, has a full fitness. I'm not sure which way that one goes actually.
I mean, I think it goes to help explaining what happened at the end of last year, because it wasn't just the PCL and kind of like a couple of interrupted seasons of footy that he was coming back from. It was another problem as well, which we kind of know affects running and would explain why he maybe didn't have the same spread around the contest or explosiveness that we saw in his rookie year. So I guess like it just points to potentially more of where the upside's coming from. But yeah, I guess it does also bring in that maybe he's a little bit more injury prone than what we thought, because the PCL and kind of shoulder injuries were unfortunate, where OP is one that can linger and flare up.
Makes a lot of sense. I think we should give Cheezo a bit of a
oh yeah, sorry. There's other people on the podcast. Yeah, sorry,
mate. I'm just working on my team over here. I'm using this as like an education session, and I'm just making a few structured changes based on what you guys are talking about.
Do you want to have a chat?
I guess the contrast between Jared Berry and Matty Rao is that I did a bit of a risk analysis podcast the other day, and the way that I sort of approach mid prices is I really simply try and calculate a margin of safety, basically trying to predict what are the chances of player X versus player Y reaching a minimum amount of cash generating. Like it's all well and good to sit here and say, oh, he had this injury and then now he's fixed that and he's got no strapping on his shoulder in terms of Matty Rao. The kid's still only played 17 games. Like it's the likelihood of picking Matty Rao to be a 22-game player that has the upside of 115 and becoming a keeper. I think people are just completely out of their minds if that's how they're approaching that selection. They need to pick Matty Rao as a selection that is primarily a stepping stone with a 5% chance of him going 100 plus. Like for the this is a really poor example to use, but Nick Cox had an opening 2 months last year. Everyone was like, oh, I can't believe I didn't start him at his elevated price, rah, 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 rah. And then the last, I want to say like 10 weeks of the year, I don't think he got 10 possessions combined. It's unlikely with Hugh Greenwood gone as well. He is pretty much their second midfielder 17 games into his career. I don't subscribe to the theory that he has the potential to be a season-long keeper. And if he's going to be a stepping stone, Jared Berry, with nearly 100 games under his belt, has more margin of safety to make me enough cash. And there's no question about Jared Berry being a keeper. We know he's a stepping stone. We're not getting sucked into this trap of thinking, I've got 13 and a half keepers because I've got Matty Rao. I think people are getting a little bit deluded based on what he can actually produce.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you there. I'm definitely, if I had to choose, I'm on the Jared Berry train over Matty Rao. It's just that game on Monday last week really just put Matty Rao right into contention. It came at almost the worst time. It just threw everything out of whack and was forcing everyone to change their structures. But Yeah, I think I agree with you with the safety there of Jared Berry. Obviously, doesn't have to average as much. He's got more games under his belt. May not have as good a role, but he's shown in the past he can at least churn out sort of 90s and make us that cash that we need. So if you had to choose between the two, I'm definitely on the Berry side of things, and that 100K or close to it can do quite a bit for your team. What would JD and Pistol, you boys, decide if you absolutely had to choose between the two? And of course, the price makes it a little bit harder of a decision, but yeah, what do you guys think?
Berry.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy Berry for me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I've noted that Chizo's a non-believer, and non-believers will not be rewarded and be taken to the promised land by Matty Rao. But no, I think you're spot on that there is, just based on the price and the history, that Berry is a safer option for the two to do what you select them for, which is make you that money and be that stepping stone to a true premium.
Yeah, if I can say one more thing on Matty Rao, is that people are attributing 12. I think it was 12 games he played. He played more than half a season last year, and he averaged in the low 60s. And people are saying, "Oh, but Hugh Greenwood's left." I don't think he played with Hugh Greenwood. Like, I think when I checked the centre bounce attendance data, he played like 2 of his 10 games with Hugh Greenwood anyway. He's literally walking into this season with the exact same role, and osteitis pubis is, as you mentioned, a lingering issue that he's officially over and he's got no problem with it. It doesn't erase the fact that we have exposed form on him not doing the 100 that everyone predicted he would do last year. People were buying him at 500K to start the season. So it's not ridiculous to suggest that 91 is like the amount that he needs to make 150K and barely scrape through as a successful selection actually has some risk involved. Everyone's only seeing the upside. Like, if everything goes his way, he probably does average 91, but there's nothing to say based on exposed form he's guaranteed to do that. And I think people are just locking him in as if he's a sure thing like Jack McRae.
Still a good pick, though. We're just deciding between him and Barry, and they're both good picks. So
yeah.
So take us through the rucks, I think, because I can see there's a bigger Darcy and Grundy Dixon line there, and we know how much you love Darcy. So take us through your thoughts on, I guess, this starting combo.
I'm probably the biggest Darcy fan amongst the three of us.
Did you get him last year?
No, how many of us owned him last year?
I think it was just Chizo.
Just Chizo.
Oh, that's the genius move you made, was it? No, congrats on that. Was it a nervous watch every week?
I had to go to an island with no phone reception and give my password to Pistol. That legitimately happened in round 22.
Oh, okay.
I was like, I can't watch this.
Look, he didn't look too hot, I'll be honest, in that second preseason game. But then you see that he had 11 out of 20 hit-outs to advantage and churned out a 95 with barely. It felt like he barely was running out there. It probably does put some doubt in your mind, but at the same time put some confidence. So I totally understand people being off him. And I think I was looking yesterday, his ownership's dropped all the way down to like 10% almost. Like Gordon and Grundy have just back into form. I know none of us, or most of us, probably thought it was a year it was finally going to change from that, but it's definitely that for the season 2022. So his upside's just incredible. So I'm going to start him and fully expect at some point probably having to trade him, but I think the points that I'll get in the bank from him will have me sort of ahead at that point. So I do love Darcy. We give him the Shrek nickname in the Discord, and I just love watching him play. He's an absolute man mountain. So look, the choice for me is actually between Grundy and Gawn, and we'll get that in a sec. But JD, do you want to chuck your Darcy thoughts in?
Another Dawn believer. I didn't know we had one in the chat. So I think you've covered it. So I mean, the simple trade-off between Darcy and Gawn is safer. Darcy is higher upside in my mind, and I guess it comes down to looking at your team overall. Do you have the capacity to take on a little bit more risk, and is it worth doing it in the ruck spot? I think people are getting a little bit carried away with preseason games. Like, you try and not evaluate Primo scoring during the preseason. And I mean, like, maybe you're really worried about Darcy having like another 3 knocks during preseason. But I mean, he played through like 8 last year and he was fine. I mean, I think he's just carries on a bit. Oh, it was 9? I mean, he like left games and come back. I mean, there was nothing funnier, can I just say? And I don't think Cheezer will agree with this, but like he's on like, I don't know, 80 after like 10 minutes, and then he's like off getting his hamstring like rubbed down by a physio, and then he's back on, and then he's back off again. Like, just seeing people that were on that roller coaster was like pretty funny. But I mean, he had a 4-game stretch where he put together the most SuperCoach points, the second most SuperCoach points of any player in the last 10 or 20 years, or something ridiculous like that. So the upside is real in this pick, and it just, I think, comes down to your risk tolerance and preference. But I am slightly leaning towards taking Darcy over Gawn at the moment.
Is there any thought given to counteracting any additional risk you take in having Darcy somewhere else in your side?
Yeah, so I think like this side's that we're looking at, the premiums in the midfield, for example, all very durable. I mean, Neil's had the one bad year, but the rest are all super durable. The defenders are all pretty durable outside of Whitfield, and I guess a little bit of Hewitt, depending on how much you think the back's going to bother him. And then the forward line comes as a bit of a risk, but that seems to be the stock standard every year. So I don't think there's too many risky premiums in this side to the point where you couldn't add Darcy into the mix.
Yeah, no, I find it interesting hearing everyone's kind of like their own risk tolerance is going to be reflected in their structures. And I think it's interesting to say that Darcy fits your risk tolerance. I was just wondering whether that is incorporated to the risk profile of your entire side, because obviously Whitfield has his own risks. We've got really poor information on the rookies down back, and we've got 2 on field. We've got Hewitt, who is arguably not going to be a keeper, 60 to 40% split. We've got Berry, who is priced accordingly because he's got his own risk. And then we've got 3 mid prices in the forward line, and then Durden and Martin on the bench. So it's like, it's interesting to weigh up each individual player and say, oh, Darcy fits my risk profile or my risk tolerance, but does it fit the risk profile of your entire side is sort of the question I'm asking.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And I think you guys have Grundy as a lock, as far as I'm aware. Most people probably do, but just after the neck injury back for last year, didn't really get going again, and this year seems to be fit. And he was a guy that has publicly put it out there, wasn't too happy through the COVID situation and whatnot. So I think back in Melbourne, he'll be raring to go.
It is very interesting hearing the Darcy thoughts. I mean, yeah, I feel like the 9 injuries are kind of laughed off, but like he does carry on a bit. I mean, we've had exposed form, as Cheezer would say, of years and years of him carrying these sort of niggles throughout games. And it kind of felt like to me, 9 injuries and not, missing a week is a luxury that Fremantle, I guess, didn't have just because they didn't have the depth available. And now that was because Lobb was injured. Now with Meek and Lobb fit, well, unless Darcy wants to KO Lobb again, but while they're both fit, if he were to get one of these niggles, it feels like they do have the depth, I guess, to cover him this season. So it would be interesting to see if last season was more of an anomaly and he would typically get a rest after one of these niggles, compared to last season. So that's kind of where I'm at. And again, Anna, you said you would feel comfortable trading Darcy if he got injured because of the points in the bank more than Gawn would make up for it. Now, the price difference between Gawn and Darcy is not that big. How many points, really, if you had to put a number on it, would you think is, worth a trade?
Well, it also depends when he goes down, doesn't it? If it's in the first 5 minutes, and it doesn't matter. Look, I think he can put 10 on him. I think he can definitely put at least 10 on him and maybe even 15. So
Darcy's going 130, 135.
130. Like he could push that, honestly. He could honestly push that.
So how many points total? Would you have to get 100 points out of that trade or 150 points? 15.
So that'd be like 8 to a couple of months. Yeah, something like that. So at least probably 10 to 12 weeks you'd have to get out of Darcy. So yeah,
you're getting cash as well. You're ending up 100k or more ahead, I think, as well, if he's out averaging him by 15.
Yeah, it depends when he gets injured, though. I guess
this is obviously best case scenario as well. He could, he could easily not out average Gawn.
Yeah, no, it's in play. It's definitely in play.
Seems like you have to have him for at least half the season out averaging Gawn by at least 10 points to break even on the trade.
Yeah, I think you're probably about right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Jeez,
you would have to make the
seems
buys,
risky.
and that's what we've seen in previous years, right? Where if you are forced to do a ruck trade during the buys, it doesn't seem to hurt as badly.
Yeah. I mean,
You might get a
unfortunately-
180 captain score made out of him as well.
Yeah, and
It feels so good. It feels great.
I guess the one other thing with Darcy, and like I know looking at fixture isn't normally the best thing, but I'm sure you guys have also noticed that Freo's fixture up to the buys is so soft. It's one of the easiest in the league.
Yeah.
And I know that rucks don't always necessarily correlate 1-to-1 with like ease of schedule because they could be facing good ruck still. But I think that is another positive for Darcy, which makes you believe that he could end up with that 10-point a game more scoring over Gawn over that first.
I mean,
10
Gawn's
weeks.
fixtures before the bye also very soft. So you're
To be fair, these buy structures pretty.
That's why I'm on
Yeah,
the dawn, boys. That's why I'm on the dawn.
Oh my
no
god!
way.
I mean,
No way.
the Grundy not picking Grundy makes little sense to me. I think I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was like he had like a 60 game like rolling average of like 125 average.
Yeah,
I was like, geez, that's just
no,
too many points.
I didn't expect you to be on board with it at all.
Yeah. Okay. I'll ask you one more thing.
Points.
I'm not even sure I am.
I'll shoot one thing that I like to think about is in terms of reliability of outcome. I think most people would say that even with Jackson getting better this year and taking some of the hit outs from Gawn, we're probably sleeping easier at night having Gawn in our side, knowing it's really unlikely that he falls off a cliff this year. I guess the reliability of what we're going to get from Sean Darcy is something that has to be within your tolerances. I think people are, again, seeing the upside of what Darcy could do and average 135, but again, we haven't seen it yet. So it is a bit of a guessing game.
Yeah,
for
taking
15K.
my side. I'm taking way too many risks in my side for me to take Darcy on as well. Like the Gawn and Grundy sleep at night factor is high, and then you've got mid-price of forward line, like Rowell and Chapman. I'm like, oh my god, it's like way too many risks. I couldn't pile on another one. Like I'm already at my limit or over my limit.
Yeah, and I think
Completely
we wouldn't begrudge anyone for picking Gawn in this spot over Darcy. I think the poll between the three was relatively close. Like it was only just ahead, and I think putting Darcy in here creates some good discussion. And I guess like the only other thing I would say on the risk tolerance stuff, and this is probably a separate conversation on like portfolio risk, like overall. But I think when you're thinking about like, it depends on finance backgrounds. I kind of don't want to go into this too much. But when you're looking at like efficient frontiers for portfolio risk and like standard deviation of results on return and all this type of stuff, I think if you're taking lots of small risk with upside, it's good. But having a safe team with a couple of really high risk players is bad. And so when I look at our teams, there are lots of risk, but I see them as relatively small risk with lots of upside. And that's why I'm kind of happy to keep adding on. So I think Darcy is a small risk with a high upside, and it kind of continues to like have an overall portfolio risk tolerance to reward that I'm happy with. But I also totally get if people are going to be more risk averse and want Gawn. Like I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Let's take us through the forward line, Chizo.
Of our team?
No. I mean, is this not an identical forward line? So yes.
Oh wait, I've got my forward line up because I was messing with my team. Oh, it is.
Glad to have you with us, Chizo. Thanks for being here.
I told you I'm using this as an education session. We've got Dunkley, Butters, Cornelio, McGovern, Sherry, and Rochelle on the field, with Durden and Nick Martin on the bench in both of our teams. I was clearly not consulted about that because that's not my forward line. But guys, I'll let you go through and explain sort of the thought process behind these. I'll start with you, JD.
I mean, Dunkley and Butters, do we actually need to talk about, and even Cogs, do we really need to talk about these three?
No, skip it.
Nope. Nope.
Okay. And then I guess like the interesting discussion is of those cheaper mid-price forwards that aren't cogs, how you have them rated and which ones you
Yep.
can fit in. So McGovern, Cherry, Brodie, Ralph Smith, Curnow, I guess, as well, if you kind of want to include him. And then I think the conversation, which I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on, is how do you have them ranked? And then how many do you think is the appropriate amount to have in your side?
I think they're all rank. I don't really like mid prices. Pistol, you had the mid pricer lowdown today, so I think you've got the best grasp of your thoughts based on these. And you had Mitch McGovern at the first in terms of forward mid prices. Why was that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not including Canelio, obviously, but McGovern, I think. You get that added bonus of that DPP at the end of round 6 as well, which is nice, as well as his role really lends to like a consistent floor. I think he's just going to make money. It might be a slow burn. We might need to hold him for a while, but at the end of the day, that feels solid, as well as being able to flick him back after round 6 when we might be struggling a little bit with the rookies on TBD. I feel like that's just a nice feeling. So that one feels like a much safer selection than some of the other mid prices. Will Brodie and Sherry, I think a lot of people only have space for one of these guys in their side. It's an interesting conversation because I do feel like the risk reward scenarios are actually not too dissimilar. Brodie, in my opinion, if he plays in the midfield, he scores well. I mean, he's always pretty much scored well when he plays in the midfield. Fremantle are either going to play him in the midfield or he's not going to be best 22. Pretty much as simple as that. And we've seen him put out back-to-back tons. So if he gets the right role, he's probably going to keep scoring well. So I'm trying really hard not to overthink this pick because I know there's job security issues. But if he's putting out tons on a consistent basis, I mean, we're talking somebody at 224K forward that can put out tons. I mean, that's pretty rare. And then you've got Sherry, whose role, I mean, we think he's going to be the number one ruck. I think we're all probably somewhat aligned on that. But it's if he's going to be 50-50 ruck split, is he going to have 60-40? And if it's 50-50, what's his upside? Can he average 90 plus with a 50-50? Might be a bit unlikely. I think he's very likely to average 75 plus and definitely make you 150K. But then again, you're comparing him directly to Brodie, who's pumping out tons at this price. So there's a little bit of, and it's not like Sherry doesn't have job security issues in himself. I mean, probably playing Larky and then two of CCJ and Sherry and Goldstein. So there's risks there as well. So I'm kind of more interested, and I'm ignoring everyone else because all the others are like, I think we're probably all on the same page that they're just worse. I more want to hear what Eno and JD have got to say about the Brodie versus Sherry conundrum, because more opinions I think will be very helpful on this one.
Well, the thing with these guys is, I know it's getting a bit technical, but it's definitely something to think about, is that obviously Gov has to be locked in on Thursday, and we don't know the full benches or the correct bench for the Sunday games which both Cherry and Brodie are in. So I think if Cherry gets named, he'll be getting named on field as the ruck, but Brodie might be, it seems to me, he'll be like an extended bench name, and that'll really throw up some conundrums, because obviously you can't, if you lock in McGovern and your structure only allows for 2, then you're going to have to take a pick between Cherry and Brodie. So as far as their overall outlook as picks, I'm definitely on board with Cherry more than Brodie, and obviously it is role dependent, but everything that's been said, and even Noble, I believe, was on SEN a couple of days ago, and he's talking about Goldie as a forward, saying what he brings to the forward line. It gives Larky and Zerha and all that a different look, because obviously the defense has to worry about Goldie, and just makes him think. And to me, that definitely instates that Cherry will be selected as a ruck. But we all know that a ruck position, even if it is 50-50, is very, very good for scoring. So I definitely have Cherry ahead of Brodie, but JD probably has some more thoughts on Brodie as a pick, as he has done some research on him in the preseason. So I'll let him speak more on Brodie, I think.
I mean, does Brodie not reek of Paddy Dow from last year?
Yeah.
I think the different pedigree probably comes to mind. I know Brodie's put together a season well, not seasons, games of high scoring that Dow just hadn't had before in the past, as well as Brody in the NEFL has put together some absolutely killer scores in the season. So I think the pedigree is just a little bit different. And just before we jump in, I know the Brody Sherry technicality on when they're names, if you're only picking one of them, because they're both Sunday games, you can kind of switch between them as well. So it's not like you'll be caught out, for example.
Yeah. No, I won't be caught out, but you will just have to lock in Gov, of course. So you obviously can't go those two over Gov or something. But yeah.
Yeah, so I think for me, like the cherry pick is easy if he's named as the ruck on field. I think he just becomes the obvious choice. If he's named anywhere else, I might lean Brody as long as Brody's actually named in the team
as well.
I like the problems I worry about with Brody is that his running is not great, and that's what the preseason reports have been. He's finishing at the back of the pack along with Darcy. And the quote I always like go back to for Brody is that he was built to crash packs, not spread them. And I just worry about that in Fremantle's midfield, where they already have Brayshaw, who's a relatively lower time on ground mid. You have potentially like Fife and Mundy going through there as well, who aren't exactly fast spreaders of the contest. And it just feels like Will Brody is another one in their type of mold that they probably don't need extra of in that side. And that's the part that worries me about, even if he's named round one, how long is he going to be in there? Does he get enough CBAs? Is he spending too much time on the bench? I think you're spot on that if he is named on ball and plays on ball, he's going to score well. I'm just really sketched out by the likelihood that happens. And that's what gives me the Paddy Dow vibes from last year, because people thought that was going to happen. He then ended up spending a lot of time forward and looking awful, playing just football generally as well. I think that's my hesitancy on Brody as a pick. And it's one of those ones where I think just starting two of McGovern, Cherry, and Brody feels right to me, because then whichever one doesn't work, you can kind of jump off and make sure you've got the other two. Because I just think it's unlikely that all three work out.
There is a world where all three work out. How would you would you take, let's say I'm taking Brody, well, then it would become a conversation between Rochelle and Sherry. Could you not take Rochelle in that case? And could you take all three of them?
Obviously, you have to find 15 or 20K. I think you can. Look, Rochelle has impressed us in the preseason, but the nature of the role and the team he plays for doesn't necessarily bank that he's going to kick 3 goals and average 85. So he can definitely throw up some poor scores, and at his also elevated price, like a Gibcus we were talking about in defence, there's every chance he's a very, very average to not great at all rookie for us. So I could see starting all three. Obviously, you need to find a little bit more cash, but yeah, I think it's plausible.
Do you think he's in more teams than he should? I think Rochelle's in like 60% of sides.
Yeah, maybe.
But how many other rookies have their coach come out and said he's in our best 22? Clearly,
no, I get it. The job security is absolutely rock solid. But if you're comparing potentially Brody banging out tons if he's got the right role, and Sherry is number one ruck in the right role, probably putting out 80s and 90s, that Rochelle is just not going to do. So
there's one of those three that we know will play round one.
It's true.
And neither of the mid prices.
Job security there, right? But if I'm not taking, if I'm taking Gawn and not Darcy, and I've got that little bit of risk tolerance there, is that something I could be looking at instead?
How dare you use my own logic against me? Yeah, no, you're right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it's spot on.
Can I just challenge you on McGovern?
You can. You can totally. You can do whatever you want.
He wouldn't be my number one for a number of reasons. Firstly, with Doherty back, those juicy kick-ins that people were saying he was getting in the preseason, he won't be.
Fair call.
He turned over both of his, so I think he would have lost it anyway.
Without Doherty, he wasn't going to get it.
He lowered his score by taking.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He's playing as an intercepting defender mostly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Third defender.
Yeah. How often did he play that in his career up until that point? This point.
I mean, he's played 0 AFL games in that role.
Yeah. So he's got injury risk. He's got role risk. He's going to lose some of the benefits that he had in the preseason. He's also 40K more expensive than the other guys that we're talking about. And we've got a really long history of him never averaging 70. So
well,
not in this role.
Throw out the role and the score straight off the bat. Well, you can't discount if someone moves into the midfield. You go, I can't pick them because they haven't played midfield before. It's a crap argument. If you've got the role, brand new role that comes with scoring increase. I mean, you can throw both those arguments straight as quickly as you add it to the conversation. You can take it out of the conversation.
I mean, his pedigree, his brother, like he's got the pedigree in the family. And then we've seen so many failed forwards go back and be good, intercepting or like third tall defenders. I mean, that's who he's replacing. Like Liam Jones is like that exact thing.
The success of someone else doing something is not evidence for him being able to do it. They are independent events.
So
what I'm saying is that
McGovern will succeed because others have done it in the past. I'm saying that because others have done it in the past, there is we have seen at least the path that forwards can transition to successful intercepting defenders.
That's right. And was Liam Jones a successful SuperCoach pick? Was he? He was a good mid-pricer of a forward line, and then went back and became a successful SuperCoach selection. That sounds like what you're saying.
You're absolutely testing my knowledge on Liam Jones, like SuperCoach scoring, which is not something I was prepared for tonight.
Personally, from my point of view, if McGovern gets the role we want, Brodie gets the role we want, Sherry gets the role we want, he's third on that list of players that I want in my side. So the reason he's number one is because we're slightly more confident than the other two that he's going to have a decent role. I don't see him going greater. If I'm being conservative, I genuinely do not see him exceeding 75 average this year. I'm not interested in paying $260K for that. I'll more than happily take a $200K Sherry and take a punt that he averaged 60 to make the same cash.
I think this comes back to Enno's argument a little bit, though, which is that if you don't take McGovern, then you're relying on both Cherry and Brodie being named in the position that you want them for. And it's hard to know if that's the case with the extended Sunday benches, and then you can't reverse once you figure that out.
It's going to be a frantic hour on the Thursday, isn't it?
That's right. If you want two of them, that would be correct. If you only want one of them, then that doesn't... You can pick the one that's...
How are you filling out your forward line if you're taking one of them?
I've seen people with another primo, or I think George has got Isaac Heaney, so maybe that's out.
Oh, gosh. Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Sorry, I brought it
up.
Let's
not go there.
But which line would you say that you guys have the most rookies that you think will play?
Midfield.
Yeah.
Pretty easily?
Not even close.
So... is there an argument?
M10 and M11.
Is there an argument to be made to take less of a risk in the forward line on two or even three of these guys that could be something or could be completely nothing and just waste our time than play someone like Dylan Stevens at M8 and McDonald at M9, have the ability to not have to have this discussion of having two or three of these guys in our forward line?
There is,
well,
but then
the premiums up forward also have inherent risk that other lines don't have. There's less risk in the premiums in the back line than there are in the forward lines, for example. So it's you don't get off scot-free either doing that transaction.
No, not at all. But let me present the idea of taking someone like a Dusty, who is probably safely going to give us 95, is a lower risk selection than having Ward and Stevens on your bench and then having Cornelio, McGovern, Sherry, and Brodie with Rochelle at F7.
Man, like if I and drop 15 kilos and you're talking about him being low risk, come on, dude. Come on, Chizo, come on. In a Richmond side that's getting worse, they're not getting better, by the way. Like that is someone you have to wait and see on. You can't start Dusty. There's no way.
I mean, they're predicted to do better, but I don't have them in my 8. Sorry.
No, mate. Don't worry, mate. Everyone's off the Tigers bandwagon, which is probably fair enough after the last year. But I probably even agree. I wouldn't be starting Dusty Chizo.
But that's the straw man. You can't take a straw man to this. What I'm asking you is there not the argument to be made for someone with exposed form that you can reliably say, I'm not going to get 40s from this dude if you don't have the risk appetite to have McGovern, Sherry, and Brody on the field.
I think
Like I'm far more confident to have Ward and Stevens on field in my midfield and go lighter in there to fill out the other sides that have terrible rookies.
No.
That's just me. That again, it comes back to risk profile.
Fair, but then you're going to have to cut what Berry or Rao or another one of the primos in the midfield.
Big dogs.
Yep.
And Berry and Rao are probably better options than any of the rookies that we have in the midfield, apart from maybe Dacos.
Yeah, they're also better than the mid prices we're talking about in the forward line. So if you can use the cash from McGovern to get another rookie, or use that cash to get someone up to Rao,
I think we're not going to be able to agree on this point because your rating of McGovern is so far below the other three of us that you're always going to end up in the boat of I'll do anything to turn him into someone else, which I think is fair if you really don't rate McGovern as an option. I think that's fine.
Yeah. I have McGovern in my side. I'm not saying that he's not a bad option, that he doesn't have answers.
No,
It's a good
question.
What I'm trying to
argue makes you think
what I'm trying to argue is that we shouldn't, like, the issue is not which one of them is going to be the best. It's how do we mitigate the risk of having two or three of them? Because as someone said at the top, if we've got Berry, we've got Chapman, we've got McGovern, we've got Sherry, we've got Cornelio, and whoever else that I'm forgetting, guess how many of those are going to succeed? Maybe two.
What do you mean by succeed?
That's not waste our time and make us 80K or get injured. They're this cheap for a reason, and there's a reason why people want to go guns and rookies. So it shouldn't just be a formality that we've got to have all of them, which is what I'm arguing for. I'm arguing for the opposite argument, that if we can reduce the amount of these guys we're forced to pick and be in a scenario where, well, I've got to lock in McGovern because I don't know whether the other two are going to play. If that's something that concerns you, try and restructure it in a way where you're not forced into that situation.
Can I ask you a different question then, Chizo? So apart from Rochelle, are there any rookies we obviously talked about Durden, Martin, Dixon, but we haven't mentioned like McKenty, which I don't know if that's even how you pronounce his name, or like Hayes or anyone else. Are there any of those that you would put at F6?
No. Rochelle would be the F6 rookie for me.
And I think that's the conundrum in the forward line, which is you have to fill it out. And so we've done it by putting in three of the mid prices. You're arguing that maybe you should be three primos and two mid prices.
I'm arguing that you're including Cornelio as the two.
Yeah.
As one of the three. Yeah, so for you it would be Cogs and one of McGovern, Cherry, Ralph Smith, whoever.
Yeah, I'm just presenting that as an option. My risk tolerance when I make my starting squad is not the same appetite as what I'm seeing in templates on Twitter and Slack and probably in Discord based on these templates. I'm not using those templates. And
as one top 10 finish, and he's desperate to hang on. This is Golem in the ring.
Well, it's the same strategy I've always used. And as JB says, rookies forge our sides. And if we don't have the rookies, we're going to be forced to make decisions that we don't want to. But if you've got Chapman at D5, suddenly you've got DeConning or McCartan in your forward line. If you've got Hayes at R3, you've got Dixon in there, you've got Durden that's going to play, Baldwin's going to play, Martin might play. Like, we are going to find two bench rookies just like we have every other year. They may not be of the same quality, but we will find two playing bench rookies. It's as simple as that. I find it very hard to believe that we will go into this season with one or two donuts on our forward or our bench lines. I don't see it happening. And for that reason, I'm not subscribing to the idea that we need to be Dunkley, 4 mid prices and a rookie on field. That's just my personal opinion. I don't. It's just my opinion. That's all it is. I can't predict the future. But I think it's silly that we're just like, we've got to lock these two players. We've got to choose two of these three. And I'm like, I'm doing everything I can to not pick one of these guys. And that's just the position I'm coming from.
No, I think you're right. We've spoken about mid prices tonight more than I have the last 5 years, and it's not pretty, but it's just what's
no. I like the thought process, and like in terms of questioning our own thinking and coming out from a different angle. I think it's important to have the conversation and then just see where you sit in it. I mean, for me, I can hear Cheese's argument and can see where he's coming from, and I think it does make a lot of sense. Like I obviously know Cheese, I know how he's played the game the last couple of years, and he's like the least amount of risk possible.
Yeah.
So I can see totally like why he would feel really uncomfortable with those types of selections. So yeah, it makes sense to him. I mean, for me, I think like outside injury risk, which is an actual risk that we do have to consider with McGovern that we probably gloss over more than we probably should. You know, I see it 70 is his worst case, I guess, just because of the interceptor role. It's not like he's a second defender and he's like kind of what Paddy McCartan's doing, where he's playing lockdown but also kind of intercepting. His like whole role is about intercepting. And for me, that feels like that 70 is that floor, and the 70 still gets you to the 120K mark. Plus there's the upside there as well to in that role. He doesn't need to average 75. I think that's the thing, is he needs to have one game to spike his cash gen.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's got a 120 plus game in him. And he could average 65 for all I care. As long as he puts out 3 good scores in a row and makes me the money, then that's literally all I care about.
Yeah. And I think it also comes down to that we've all got our own biases, and we're all fallible. And the reason that it sounds like I'm contradicting myself and saying he's a bad pick but still having him on my side is because I'm conscious of the fact that there are people better at this game than I am, and I'm not trying to pretend that I know everything. And the fact that I've got so many smart people around me that've played this game for so long that really like him is I'm trying to counteract my own biases and say, well, why don't I like him? What are my thought processes to that? And the fact that particularly, you know, Pistol, you're so hot on him and you've watched the preseason games over and over again, there becomes like an element of trust in that I know sometimes, you know, that people know more than what I do. And I think I've sort of backed myself into a corner going really strong on him, but I think that's me trying to dig myself out of a hole. I trust you.
I think there's two things picked up on. So like one, the talk about biases is really interesting because I do think we could be falling victim to recency bias, especially in our forward lines. So prior to last year, we'd never had so many mid prices work out in a forward line. And then last year we had Impey, Danaher, Zeeble, and then like even Hall to an extent later on in the year. And so now we're all going like, oh, we can pick like 3 or 4 and like this will work out again. But really that's never happened before last year. And so it was like, was last year the exception to the rule, or is this like the new norm that we can kind of expect, or should
that's
be
a great question.
Like, and then I think the other thing on McGovern, I guess, like to back you up with the like reason to be put off is in the preseason games, intercept, like the ball just gets bombed into forward 50 about 2.5 times more than what you'd see in regular season games. And so for someone like McGovern, who might have, I think, peeled off like 5 or 6 intercept marks, something like that, you're probably not going to get that much opportunity during the regular season. So you wouldn't expect him to score that much. But I mean, his scoring was ridiculous, like what, 112 off 3 quarters. Yeah, like it was nuts. So I mean, but I think like Pistol's right. Like he's not going to be a premium for us. He's not even going to average, I think, like 85. But you just need that one really big intercept defending game, and you're good. And I think the other thing that we talk a lot about with risk, but we kind of overlook when it comes to injury risk, is that risk is less for mid prices because you don't need them to play 23 games. You need them to play like 1/3 of that well, and then they're out of your teams. Yep. And so that's one thing, like we compare risk for like premiums and mid prices sometimes the same, but really they're actually different because you're evaluating them over different lengths of time.
Yeah, it's a time-specific risk that also comes into the price. The more expensive they are, the longer you need to hold them for them to appreciate that amount. So I guess that sort of leans into the point that I'm saying he's more expensive than these other guys, because if Sherry loses number 1 ruck role, the chances are by the time that happens, he's already made us enough cash. Whereas if McGovern's role changes slightly, he's probably only made us 80K up until that point. I think that's sort of what I was getting at, but explained it quite. I love these conversations. This is my favorite part of doing podcasts like this with new brains, to just kind of break it down from different angles. I love this.
It's definitely necessary.
I think an interesting thing about last year, I know, JD, you said, did we get lucky, or what was it that last year there were so many successful picks? If I'm going to add, I guess, Hind into that basket, or Atkinson, half in the basket, half out of the basket, I think it's pretty clear, though, looking at it as a whole, we've seen almost all of those picks outside of Danaher, they moved to the back line, right? Like every successful pick played as a backman. Now, if we look at the averages this season of the backmen and of the forwards, the backman scores are really good and the forwards are not very good. And I think it might just be more with the way, I guess, the game is currently being played. It lends itself to defenders just scoring better than forwards, in which case I think this was a couple of years ago now where the ruckmans were just outscoring the midfielders, and all we tried to do is stuff as many ruckmen as we could in our teams. And it kind of feels somewhat as similar, and I'm going to just try and fill my team with ruckman and defenders in those mid-prices spots, or trying to pick up breakouts.
You can have Blitzars if you want. He's a ruck and defender, depending on what week it is.
Wasn't he a ruck mid one year?
He was.
Yeah, like the only one in history.
So we've just got, I think maybe it's a changing of the guard, and defenders are just now scoring more than they've ever scored before. And that's why these picks have suddenly become a bit more successful. So I kind of feel even a little bit better knowing that he's a defender. Whereas there might be, Sherry's obviously a ruck, which is another good position, which does then lend itself to thinking, hey, maybe Brody is the worst option just naturally because of the role that he plays. But midfield's always a good scoring option. So it's not, it's not a fair comparison.
I think it's one of the things the SuperCoach community's got a lot better over the last 3 years, which is identifying why players break out. And it used to be a lot of people trying to pick like second and third year breakouts. And that was the thing you'd hear people going after, especially like after Oliver did it, for example. And people were like trying to find what that lightning in the bottle was. But really Unicorn. It is around, it really is around identifying those that are having role changes into positions that are SuperCoach friendly. And that seems to be what's been the thing that's been discovered the last couple of years, and that people are getting much better at doing. So I think we will see more of this. I do think it's the start of a new trend, but it is interesting to consider it was last year one-off, or is this something we're going to see more of going forward?
I think we should pop up the Dr. SuperCoach template if we've got it here, because we're running a bit long.
Well, we've done most of the breakdown. We didn't have a timeline in.
No, I guess we can just compare differences now. Really,
long format pods are my favorite.
I think the big thing down back. I mean, there's a clear change here, so I'm just going to read it out for those listening at home. We've got Lloyd, Crisp, Short, Whitfield, Chapman, D5, McCartan, Gibkiss on the bench, De Koning. I think. I've obviously spoken for me, it's Hinge, not Gibkiss, but I think this is a reflects, overall template. The big one here is the two premium defenders. It comes at the cost of, lighter in the midfield. And I'm interested. I noticed that you guys in the template had Ridley at D1. Is there a reason why all of Rich, Stewart, Crisp, Lloyd have been, I guess, neglected?
That's a lot to run through. So I can run through bits and pieces we don't like about all of them, and maybe talk to some of the upside of Ridley as well. Where do you want to start?
I would love to know, assuming when you've got the downsides of all of those players, there'll be some positives as well, but I'd love to hear them.
I think for a lot of them, especially with that structure, you're tied on cash. So you are trying to find value in the back line. And I think the reason why that template avoids Lloyd, Crisp, Rich, and Stewart is because there isn't much meat on the bone. You're paying for what you get for a lot of them. Now, some may argue that there is upside on some of those. It's just, I think through our evaluation, there's probably a few points at best for some of them. But I think it's unlikely. So Lloyd, for example, obviously he scored much higher in the past, but the second half of last year, he averaged 106 with 70% kick-ins and Dawson out of the back line. So people saying that Dawson leaving all of a sudden means more points for Lloyd. Not sure that really comes true. And if that's the case, then really he's kind of priced at fair value or even a little bit overs at the moment.
Yeah.
Crisp is someone that we've seen who's ultra durable. That's obviously his upside. Oh, sorry, not his upside, but his superpower, a bit like Lloyd, who's also been super durable. But we haven't really seen him score higher with more CBAs. He hasn't really scaled like that in the past. That's not to say he can't do it in the future, but it just seems like, once again, you're kind of paying for what you get with him as a pick. So there's not much value there. Rich, I think, could actually have some upside just because the person that was going to take some of the kick-ins from him in Coleman, or like replace Birchall's kick-ins, is no longer there. So you could see him go from kind of 70% kick-ins in the back half of last year up to 75-80% maybe, and so he gets an extra kick or two a game. But he's older, over 31, who we generally he's 31, who we generally try to avoid players over 30, and he does have some injury history. So I think that's the downside risk of Rich. And then Stewart, someone coming off the Liz Frank, which has been a career ender for other players before, is someone that I will avoid. If he hadn't been injured coming into the preseason, he would easily be the pick of the bunch for mine. So I guess what's difficult is, I think like Lloyd and Chris will be right up around the top 6. And I think if everything goes right for Rich and Stewart, they could be as well. And it is scary avoiding all of them. But there's just, at the same time, no value. And I think some of the other defenders can get close for 40, 50K cheaper.
Yeah. So it sounds like that you guys really value picking players that have some upside, as opposed to you're kind of just getting what you pay for in the terms of like Lloyd and Crisp.
Yeah, you obviously can't do that throughout the whole team with SuperCoach. It's just not possible, especially when you look at the midfielders. You are hoping that you get what you pay for when you're forking out 700K. But with the structure that we ran, you're quite tight on cash, and defense was one of those areas where it felt like you could get away, paying 40, 50K less for a Ridley than maybe some of these other guys, and still end up with a score that's close.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a really good point to make, because I was on Ridley early on in the preseason until we did the triple D on him, in that he had 84% of kick-ins over the first month when he averaged 133. We knew he was going to get the lion's share, but at no point did we predict it to be that high. After he got concussed, he averaged, I think, 42% for the remainder of the year, and both Heppel and Redman split the extra 40% that he didn't get. Now, we saw in the first preseason game, I want to say he had 3 of 8, and then in the second preseason game, I think he had like 6 of 10 or something like that he was there for. So the after he lost those kick-ins for the remainder of the year, he averaged low 90s, and that's the only reason, that was over like a 16 game stretch or something ridiculous like that. So it's not unreasonable to suspect that he does have some genuine upside, and there's chance for natural progression and growth. I think the reason that I took him out of my starting squad was because I'm trying to be a little bit more realistic, in that he's probably got upside of like 105 if everything goes well, and he's probably gonna only appreciate 3 or 4 more points than what he is. And so if I'm going to pick someone that's going to basically give me what I'm paying for, I'd rather have someone that has long-term history of doing it. And so that's sort of my thinking, where I grapple with picking someone like Crisp, for example, because I'm fairly, or Lloyd or anyone like that, Stewart, Rich, whatever, is that I can be pretty confident that I'm going to get what I pay for. And if I don't have the money, that's not to say I wouldn't go Ridley, but that's just sort of how I've rationalized picking someone like Lloyd over Ridley.
Yeah, Enno's being quiet because he knows I'm about to go on a Ridley rampage right about now, just reeling off some facts. So I'm going to give you the upside case for Ridley. So firstly, like the first preseason game, it was, I think, 2 of 7, and he was going to take the 3rd of 8th, but halftime sounded, and so didn't get the kick. But he was off for 9 minutes of the first quarter, and that's when basically most of the kick-ins, apart from 2 from Redmond in the second quarter, were taken, that he wasn't involved with. It doesn't make any sense why he was off for so long in the first quarter. I've got no explanation for what went on there, because he's normally like high time on ground. So I think they were just playing around with stuff in defense. And and then in the second preseason game, you're right, I think he took 5 of 9 So yeah, spot on there, like above 50%, which was more than he had in the second half of the year. And in the second half of the year, I think I had him averaging 97 from round 7 onwards.
Yep.
And so I think like the upside here for him is really that he was playing like career games, like 31 to 48. I think he's on now. He's age 22, so he's got upside both in terms of hitting that age profile, like, you know, getting a year older at his age is important, but also then going towards that 70 game mark, which is where players tend to hit their peak or they really get those straps going. You see a lot of SuperCoach improvement during that period as well. And then Essendon obviously went and recruited Kelly in the off season to free him up and be able to play more of that interceptor role. Now, I went back and looked at some of the tape on games after he was concussed last year. So my cheat version of this was looking at the first and third quarter of games, fast forwarding 15 seconds on KO to find who he was matched up on. And basically in all 6 of the games I looked at before I got tired, because it was way too time consuming and I do have a real job, I promise. He was doing one-on-one lockdown roles, and that's where you saw a lot of the poor scoring. Like he's taking Green, he's taking Papley, he's taking Liam Ryan. And so even in the first preseason, the Amy game we saw this year without Kelly in the side, they were letting him sag off and play that interceptor role. And I didn't see a lot of that from him in the second half. And so that's where I think his upside comes from. I'm fairly sure he gets to 105 with upside on top of that, which is what excites me. And I'm also a bomber nuffy for those that don't know. So
Guilty.
I guess take it with a grain of salt. But that's why I'm so bullish on Ridley compared to maybe some of these others. I do see the value there.
Yeah.
I got some questions, though, before I get too in the weeds with Ridley. Just for the group as a whole, so I think the 4 defenders I'm going to talk about, Rich, Stewart, Lloyd, Crisp, they cleared the other defenders by 5 points per game last season that are available as defenders this year. How many of you guys had Rich in your team last year?
Nope.
None. Okay, cool. What about Crisp?
Nope.
All right. None. So how many had Lloyd?
I had him.
Yep.
So everyone?
Yep.
And did anyone not start him? Okay, so everyone started him. And what about Stewart?
Brought him in during the year.
I'm going back to check my team now. I don't remember.
I think I had him late as well.
I don't think I had him late. Yeah, I don't think I had him.
So from the 4...
Oh, no, I did have him. Yeah, no, I had Stewart. Yep.
Did you bring him in or did you start with him?
Yeah, I brought him in. Definitely didn't start him.
So basically, from these 4 best defenders, only one of them was brought in the side if you didn't start him. So I guess my fear is for these types of... During the year, I'm totally happy to pay for these expensive midfielders and bring in the expensive midfielders. And that's something that we've done in the past. You pay for what you get. These defenders that kind of hover, the consistent ones that hover at 550k, we always get these value defenders instead that are like 470, 480, and they're the ones that we kind of bring in instead. The top end ones who are consistent, we typically can't afford, and we fade. And for me, I'd rather start them knowing that they're going to finish in the top 6 of their line, and I'll be able to, bring in the cheaper ones throughout the season. It's just one less stress, and I feel like at the end of the day, it's going to increase my team scoring potential, because round 22 comes around and I've got, a Lloyd and a Crisp or a Stewart and a Crisp or whoever I start, and, short's my D3. And if you've got short at your D1, I think it all adds up at the end. I mean, it's not like I'm going to get through the year without Steele. Like, I'm going to bring him in, especially with these trade boosts as well. I think it might be a little bit easier to grab the midfielders. And I don't know about you guys, but spending a trade boost to try and grab like a defender, it's not like hot on my list of priorities.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. You're also like missing probably the 2 that were the most important to own last year, which was Laird and Mills. Which both aren't defenders obviously anymore. Yeah.
Did you guys get Mills?
I had Mills.
Did, yeah.
I faded him.
So I didn't get Mills either because it was too expensive. And I couldn't get him. So it was another one to this. I think we probably all would have started Laird. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we all started Laird. So we started these guys. So it's basically like it's almost if you don't start them, you don't get them. And it wasn't just last year. I actually went back through my last couple of teams, and I seem to always miss some of the more expensive defenders throughout the seasons because I just don't start them. And a lot of the time, it's because you try and take shortcuts in other positions. You try and like nail your midfield, and you get those, I guess, cheap defenders. And the fear is here that typically you say, oh, well, my D6 won't hurt me that much because defenders are lower scoring positions. And if my D6 only averages 95 or it's a Stephen May and he's gone 92, it won't really hurt me that much because my D6, at optimum is only going to average 100 and I'll lose whatever 8 points per game. Defender scoring's been going up every year. And if my D6 now averages 105 and your D6 averages 92, that's going to be a big difference throughout the season.
Yeah. I guess the trade-off that I'm seeing is more known commodities in the backline rather than all 4 premiums having value. Whitfield short, I forget what the other 2 were, Ridley and Hewitt.
George,
they're all value. They're all value, but you've compensated by getting Steele in your midfield. So you're not having to. Oliver's probably the big one that you're missing. So you're only chasing one guy, whereas in the back line, if you're keeping Hewitt, you've only got 2 spots for 4 of the, and when Hall comes back and, there's probably 6 guys out of the top 10 that you've got to fit into 2 spots. And is that compensatory for having an extra midfielder that you don't have to chase? And, being able to chase the absolute best midfielders might get you more points long term. So I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. I'm just these are the 2 contrasts that I'm sort of seeing.
Yep. I think it's pretty clear what the strangle is between the templates. It's the big dog M3, and then the surety up back that you guys have got with this template. Like obviously the forward's the exact same and rucks as well, but that's the 2 differences really. So
should we go through the midfield?
Wait, no. We've got to talk about D5 first because this
D5
is an abomination.
Right. So Chapman.
Yes.
I'm not. This is totally Pistol's bag because I don't subscribe to him at D5. But I will say, Freo's got a good run.
Yeah. Well, you didn't like that argument for Darcy, so let's hear it for Chapman.
Look, I'm scraping for anything that I can to help my bloke out.
No, look, Chapman, for me, is, I guess, it's got multiple prongs here of benefits. One is personally, again, another personal opinion, I don't want to start Gibkiss at all. 50 average that Enno's put on him at that price, I feel like isn't
bit of a
good enough value for a starting spot. It's taking up, a spot in my team. And if he's going to make 100K, which is what 50 average, I feel like Chapman can make 100K as well. And Chapman will score better and also has a higher chance of going well. So Chapman, for those that haven't really watched him play, he's got quite a good role for Fremantle in that back line. He's not a close checking defender. He's one of the distributors, but not just that. The way Fremantle have been playing these 2 games, I know it's against West Coast, so the sample size is not fantastic. They've been playing a lot of chip footy, so they had 139 marks last week, and that there was a lot of like sideways marks. And how they use Chapman in that is he would be the guy that they would switch to. So that was a big benefit because it's better to be the guy that they switch to rather than the person doing the switch, because the person doing the switch obviously gets the mark and then kicks it sideways, which is worth less SuperCoach points than the person who takes the uncontested mark and then has the long effective kick down the line. It was a role that they basically had on repeat in the first half of that game. I think he was on 59 points at halftime, and you'd seen the same play like 5 or 6 times in the first half before West Coast started putting some pressure on the second half and it dried up a little bit. But he is going to be a breakout player at some stage. This might be a year too early. Completely, there is massive risk in the pick itself. But I don't mind it because of the easy draw. The role is kind. I like the long-term injury to Wilson, so his usage should be a bit higher. But more so, it buys time as well in that spot. It allows us to get to week 6 so that we can swing McGovern back, so we can hopefully swing Dacos back. It's a pick that's not going to lose. He's not going to drop in price. He will still gain money. I think personally, he can match Gibkiss's money that he can make while scoring more points on field. And if that's the case, round 6 comes around, he's one of my first guys that I'm upgrading to get him off the field and upgrading to a premium mid, so I can catch back up with a premium mid and swing McGovern and Dacos back there. So that's kind of the benefits that I see by having Chapman at D5.
Would you be that hot on him if we actually had rookies, or is
No.
a relation? What's the word? Like a relationship of like coincidence or something like, or
it's a lack of
like
options to fit structure. That's all. It
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
if Coleman was here, you wouldn't even looked at Chapman twice this preseason, right?
Yeah.
Well, I actually didn't. I've never had Coleman. I've been kind of anti-Coleman. In the past, I had Chapman here before Coleman in this spot.
Whoa.
More so.
Oh, this is an Aaron Hall thing. I had him in round 5 before
No, you
anyone had him.
you can check my team, my Slack, whatever it is. I didn't think Coleman would have had the role that everyone predicted, and actually in that first, before I got injured, people were not happy with his role, and I was like, that's what I thought. Anyway, the point is, I wouldn't pick him if we had defender options, because out of all the mid prices, he's near the bottom for me. I think he's better pick than like Ralph Smith and Kerno, but I think he's still worse than like McGovern and Cherry and Brody. I think he's down there. So it's not like I'm ecstatic about the pick, but the other picks I do think can come with a degree of great success. I mean, my success criteria for Chapman is not going to be 150K. It's going to be 100K and getting to round 6 and me avoiding all of Gipkis's bad scores that might end up on people's field, depending on how their structure, their side is. So I think, it's not something I'm super happy with. I'm not going to lie. It's the point of my team that I am least happy with, but there's enough positives there that I think sometimes buying time isn't a negative in SuperCoach.
All right, so can I check a hypothetical at you? Sin gets named on the field round 1. Do you drop Chapman to him, or are you moving like a Hinge or a DeConning to Sin instead?
So assuming all the other rookies are named, I probably am still fading Sin. I think he needs to perform really well to hold his spot, but the quality that he would be pushing out of that Port Adelaide side, you've got Dersma. Off the top of my head, he's probably would be the one that would make way. I think that the risk is really high for Sin, and he could also be a sub candidate, and that would kill his cash generation. So Sin's not really high on my list unless there was a long-term injury. People say that he might play by Bonner, and Bonner's probably going to play at least like 14, 15 games for Port this year. So
he's the kick-out taker too.
I just don't really see. I would love a rookie to come in so that I could change up my structure. If there was someone better, like, I don't know, if Wilmot was guaranteed to play round 2, then I would consider that. But from the options that we have when we're looking at Boyd and we're looking at Sin, I'm just like, it's none of it is very appealing to me. I'd rather get to round 6, do my switcheroos, get the players that I want down back on field, and then go from there.
Fair enough. Move on to the midfield.
Well, midfield's the same thing as before.
Yeah,
I was going to ask about like Edwards and Blakey, but I won't do that too. It's a little bit off the beaten path.
Keep your personal research to yourself, JD.
Blakey's price is a bit. If Blakey was the same price, I'd be taking Blakey over Chapman.
Yeah,
but he's not, so I can't.
Yeah.
In the midfield, we've got McRae, Took, Neil, Rowell, Berry, Jason Horn-Francis, Nick Dacos, and Ward. And on the bench, we've got Dill Stevens, McDonald, and Owens from St Kilda. Obviously, the big difference is Rowell in our midfield over the third big dog in, I think you guys had Steele.
Yep.
This is the common one that I'm seeing. I'm seeing in Slack as well, that this is pretty standard. Pistol, do you think it's necessary to have both Rowell and Berry? Like, it seems almost a fait accompli in our Slack that people want to have Rowell and Berry.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, just throwing out numbers, and obviously JD, and if you don't agree, shout out. But Rowell, you would probably predict to go within 30 or around 30 points of steal, give or take 5 points. And that money that you save ends up going into the back line and getting you a Stewart or a Lloyd. And the difference that you're playing, a McCartan on field, I don't think McCartan's going to go 30 points within Lloyd or Crisp or Stewart. So I feel like straight off the bat there, you're getting more points on field and you're not really even sacrificing cash generation, because if you're not picking someone like Gibkis, I think we're probably all going to agree that Raul's going to make more money than him as well. So I feel like you make more money and more points by sacrificing that midfield slot to end up with a Raul and a Berry.
Agree. It's just that it becomes much harder to upgrade to a steal later in the year than it would a defender.
Yeah. And that's where the trade boosts, I guess, strategy comes in, how aggressively you want to use it. I think if there weren't trade boosts, I would be much more hesitant in going shorter or smaller, I should say, in the midfield. I feel incredibly uncomfortable with just 3, gun premium midfielders. But yeah, this is where that strategy comes with the trade boosts, and I plan personally on using them to bring in, top of the range midfielders.
Why do I get the feeling, Pistol, that just like in previous years where you're the first to run out of trades, you'll be the first to run out of trade boosts?
Probably.
Guys, it's round 8. I'm in trouble.
No, I'll be guns blazing, using my boosts. I'm not going to leave anything behind. I'm going to see how it goes. I think the person who gets the boosts right this season is probably the person that wins SuperCoach or does really well. And this year, where there's no real way of knowing straight off the bat what the best use of the boosts are going to be. So I'd rather be more aggressive and be wrong than, get to the end of the season and be like, you know what, the best way to play it was actually to just use them.
This is what he says every year with his trades. He's just copied and pasted from his speech last season. I'd rather use them all than lose.
I mean, upgrade cadence is one of the most important things during the year, and like where you win. So the trade boosts tend to make sense to be getting more premiums into your side earlier and being able to coast out the year. I think the choke point is going to be, are your rookies making enough cash to let you use the trade boosts at that cadence? And are you actually getting replacement rookies that are worthwhile taking? Because I could see us getting into a situation where it's like, we'll get the extra premium on, but then you kill your cash generation and you actually just can't get your last premiums done later on in the year, even if you have the trades.
With Chesser injured and Clark injured and Holland's not in the team, we probably have like better downgrade options than we've ever had in like the last 5 years as well.
Better than our starting options.
Yeah, they are. They're all better than our starting options as well. So I feel more confident than last season. I feel like last season we got all the good rookies at the beginning, and then halfway through the year we were like, I mean, I'm pretty sure I picked up Mead throughout the season, and I'm like, what am I meant to do here with
this Waterman as well in the forward line? That like became a headache. I remember that.
Yeah,
like we got stuffed around with a lot of those downgrade options, whereas this year, because we've been stuffed around in the preseason and we don't have those options to start the year, hopefully that means better ones in the end. If we're making money, I mean, whole point is, I think every year I've started with 13 premiums and this year I have 11. So it's obviously a big shift, but hopefully the mid prices I'm taking don't all flop and I'm making more money than before, in combination with boosting will allow me to turn over money much more quickly and be able to upgrade much more quickly and get more premiums before everybody else. I know I'll have used way more trades because I'll be boosting more. But again, you only get one season to try and figure out how to use the boosts more effectively and get an advantage over everybody else. So I'd rather basically go down swinging and try and win the game than just play conservatively, finish top 1,000 for the 4th time in a row and just call it a day. Like one day I'm going to beat Chizo's 8th. That's the aim.
Not happening. I guess. Enno, do you have any comments in general about the differences between the two midfields?
Or the trade boosts?
Yeah.
Well, boys, I look, being too keen for SuperCoach, I made an NRL team last week, and they're actually up there that says trade boost, and I clicked on it and had to see what it looks like. But no, it's been an awesome discussion today, and honestly, it puts me nowhere closer to knowing what I'm going to do in bloody less than 48 hours. So still got to figure that out. But it really, that third big dog really does strangle the rest of the team, and obviously especially defense. And it's clear to see. It's just so hard dropping a big dog midfielder when we've started 4 or 5 nearly every year for the last 6 years. So that's what's in my brain, and that's clearly what is keeping me doing it. But it is definitely consideration.
Have we had I feel like last year just was like a year out of nowhere. We just had so many that went 115 plus. Am I just imagining that? Like I feel like
the
our
biggest year.
It's the most. It's the most
Yep.
that they've
Yeah.
had by far.
So I think a
Is
lot
that
of the
going to
times, like,
continue? Do you think
It's
it
been a
continues?
slow
That's
trend up over time.
That's the question. There's just so
So
many good mids now.
the benchmark for what an M8 has gone up like heavily over the last, I don't know, 10 years. It used to be 105, and that's what you hear people reference, and it was genuinely like 115 last year. So you started Merritt and he finished I think M9 at 115 average, and you're like kind of disappointed because he played 22 or whatever, scored you 115, but he got cheap at the buys and he wasn't even a top 8 mid. And you're like, oh, this sucks. Like, crazy stuff.
Yeah. Obviously, we've gone through our ruck line where we went Gawn over Darcy. I'm pretty comfortable that that discussion kind of brought to the fore our side of things.
Yep.
And our forward line was identical, so we're totally in agreement, and all four of us are in the same boat, and we all believe that this is the perfect amount of mid prices, and we're all on board.
I'll throw a question at JD. I think if you get Dixon named, Hayes named, and Martin named, are you taking all three, or would you be dropping one of them for like McEntee, again, don't know how to pronounce it, or a Durden just because job security, or how would you play that scenario?
Yeah, I think for me, it really does come down to that job security, because for Hayes, it kind of depends if he gets named with Ryder in the team or not, for example. And Martin's come out of nowhere for Essendon, that if he does make the side, you're going to have to carefully study who's been omitted and the likelihood that Martin holds down a spot. I think Dixon's probably like the most obvious of the three, just because of what's happening with West Coast's list. But yeah, I would. So I've played with the devil's money and like run 3 102K plays in my side to see what I can do, and you can do some really nice stuff. You can do some really nice stuff.
That's
I
great
can get rid of Chapman
from like the
Hewitt.
whole bench.
Yeah. But like every time I do it, I kind of know that I'm asking for trouble. And so I think I'm probably just going to end up running 2 of them if we even get that many selected. But I don't think Durden seems obvious because of job security, even though the scoring potential is not high. McEntee, Baldwin, and I'm sure there's another one that I'm missing that's obvious as well. Like none of them scream great job security or scoring either. So like, why wouldn't you just go the 102K route when at least you get the 20K and don't have to score as much to get you the money?
JD, as a Bombers fan, do you reckon that Martin gets a game? Because I don't have him currently in our best 23.
So I wouldn't have before the Amy game. I can see a world where they play him like wing or half forward and push Langford up into the forward line with Francis and Jones both being out. But I don't know how long they persist with that once like Francis is healthy. And I think that's the hard thing to know. We also saw that Martin played amazing as a sub. So it's really easy to see them putting him in that role at points throughout the year, which worries me because he does seem to have that flexibility and where he could play around the ground. But I mean, he's come out of nowhere for me. Like I didn't even have him ahead of Wanganeen for getting a list spot. And now will he get a game? Job security is pretty shaky there. Where do you see him, Chizo? Just not in the best 23.
I don't necessarily see him in the best 23. I think he's probably going to get a game. He's probably going to be a sub. I see his best sort of role as wing. Based on the preseason game. The interesting one for me is I probably had Baldwin almost ahead of Francis to begin with. I think we know with Francis what we're going to get from him, and it's not that great. Whereas Baldwin obviously had the high reps as a young kid before he did his ACL twice. So with Jones going down, it's probably going to give Baldwin a month, for example, whereas I don't see a world. I mean, there is a world where Martin plays the opening month. I just feel like if you're taking, say, Jack Hayes and Martin on your forward bench, there's a high likelihood that you end up with 2 donuts immediately, like within the first fortnight, which is probably something that really concerns me, being a risk-averse type of SuperCoach player.
And that's before you look at the 6 blokes that'll be on your field, and they're not.
Yeah,
like even Dunkley, Butters, Cog. Cogs looks pretty fit, but those mid prices as well. You don't fill you with a lot of confidence either. So
I guess,
Yeah.
Jezo, do you take Baldwin then if he's only got a month in the team before Jones is back? Because then he doesn't make really any money, and then you get a dead Waterman rookie.
No. So I was saying that I thought he was ahead of Francis anyway. So I
So
actually
you think he can play for a consistent period of time?
Longer.
Yeah. The problem is
Interesting.
the problem is we haven't seen definitive evidence that's going to happen. We haven't had Francis available to say that he's going to play. It's just from a supporter's point of view, it may be something that I'm wishing more than. But we absolutely love Baldwin at the club, and I think he is probably going to be given a go the same way that Harry Jones was given a go last year before he was really fully up to speed with the game. So
I think like if Baldwin's kicking a goal and a half a game, right, over the first month, Francis doesn't knock him back out. Like Francis isn't cemented into that slot. So as long as Baldwin plays well, he'll take the position. I think that's where I'm at. But it's just we've never seen him play before. He's had 2 ACLs. He was a talented junior, but Essendon's forward line hasn't been the best, and our entry hasn't been the best. So can he actually play well over that first month, secure the spot? That's a tricky conversation.
Our small forward is where we've got a spot opening, and unfortunately we didn't get Bobby Hill because it would be really helpful. But if we have someone that can even remotely play small forward in any way, they're probably locked in for 6 months.
So I think what's interesting is you could, knowing that Dixon's probably going to have at least a month in him minimum, just because of the Darling injury, and then who knows after that. If you take Hayes at F8, it just gives you the flexibility to trade Dixon out and cash in some cash. Don't know how much it will be, but it just gives you that flexibility, and then you can keep Hayes as your R3, and that way you gain that extra 20k at the beginning of the season. You don't need to take McEntee and Baldwin kind of F7, F8, or you don't need to spend the 40k on Durden as well. So you can save a bit of 40k and use that on your field, which can make a big difference at the beginning of the season. So I'm definitely, I mean, that's the combo that I currently have.
You've got all 3 1 or 2Ks, do you?
No, Baldwin and Hayes making up my bench, so that I can then swap Dixon with Hayes when the time comes. If I had another 20k, I would be getting Durden. I just can't, and I need the money at the moment, and that's I guess my biggest issue.
Dixon gives you an F9 as well. Because if you are doing that, until Hayes obviously doesn't play outside of the first month or so, but before that,
I do think Hayes can play. It's not like he can play alongside Ryder as well. He's totally.
He's in the AFL. Of course, he can play.
He's the same build, like height is 1 centimeter taller than Mason Wood, who gets a gig every week. It's not like Mason Wood can't be dropped either. It's not like
I feel like he'll just be in and out, depending on Ryder and all that. Season. Like he'll just about 1 round here, 1 round there. That's
which is actually not a bad R3 situation.
Yeah,
because you get cover randomly throughout the season.
Get a loop here and there, but
you get a loop.
I don't think you
can sell him
when we'll be looking for a loop this season.
Yeah.
To be honest,
no, it won't be hard to find.
They're coming.
Yeah, round 1 will be interesting if we have a whole team named and no loops available. I think with West Coast's half a team, I think most people are just going to be looking at Took Miller there.
Yeah.
Straight C.
Straight C. Yeah.
I think it's fine. All right, guys. I think that pretty much ticks off everything that I wanted to talk about. Did you guys have any other questions, or are we good?
I think the only other thing that hasn't been talked about a lot, but probably will matter once teams drop for round 1, is what you do with the last 2 bench spots in the midfield. So McDonald seems like the one everyone's kind of got penciled in as a bit of a lock for Hawks, even though he may not be guaranteed. But then after that, you've got Hoff, Soligo, Owens, and potentially even Stevens from Geelong.
Mm-hmm.
Where have you kind of got them rated? How are you thinking through? But, imagine we live in a world where all of them get named. What do you do?
What a world.
So I think for me, Owens...
Hawk.
For all of them get named. Owens scored 39 SuperCoach points in the last quarter when he came on, and they've now got, 4-week injuries, first month out for Clark, as well as Billings, and Zach Jones as well on mental health leave. So there's a spot for him. He was a decent ball winner He's kind of that X factor type winger. He's a 190 centimeter winger. I think he can accumulate the ball just at a rate that the other guys probably can't. So that's probably where I look in terms of upside, but job security is not the best. I think for Crows, Soligo is got no job security whatsoever. I wouldn't even be touching him, to be honest with you. We've got Dawson, Miller, Seedsman coming into those wing roles. Even Soligo moving to the half forward doesn't really help because of the way they structure their side. They can bring in Pedler, they can bring in Barry. There's just too many fringe people that he'll be in and out. He can play sub, kills his cash gen. It just screams at a non-selection. And then Hoff is not ready to play AFL, but they don't have a choice. So you kind of force into it. Something that I've been considering is taking McEntee in the midfield, just because I feel like Port Adelaide typically in the past, when they play a youngster, they really play them for a long period of time. And the competition for that spot is really Motlop. And I don't think Motlop's that good.
Yeah, he's been getting by on name value alone.
How long's Robbie Gray out for also?
He's not. He's fit.
I think he's going to be
fit,
good.
so-
But
McEntee
McEntee was in the team and playing before any of that. Like he was in the 22. So
He
that
played
gives me
last year.
confidence there.
Am I right about that?
He was a
played one game
mid-season pickup. Mid-season rookie.
It was a
draft.
mid-season. So I did some research into him. He was a midfielder before he got picked up. They picked him up. They converted him into a small forward in the SANFL. He was quite successful in the SANFL. I think he averaged like 17 touches and 1.5 goals a game, something like that. So not a bad ball winner by any stretch of the imagination. And then now you've got a situation where Fantasia's out for like 2 months and Motlop's really fringe in his own side, to be honest. So that's a position where I feel like he could hold if he's named from round 1. So I'm kind of feeling like out of all of these dodgy bench, M11 types, he actually might be just the go for me, to be honest.
So, but you've got him behind Baldwin and Durden?
Yeah, only because it's in the forward line. It's a bit tricky. I also need that 20K, which is why I have Hayes. So that's where that becomes an issue. But yeah, at the moment I have Owens until Owens isn't named, and if he's not named, then I'll get McEntee, and that's kind of how I plan on navigating. I think Hoff is a player who could play, and if he plays 6 games, will get probably defensive status as well, which is kind of cool. But I also see him having that 45 to 50 scoring potential and being a really slow burn. And as soon as they get Cole back and these defenders, I just don't see him surviving the side. And they're very Harry Sharp-like. If they're fit early, he's not ready to play AFL. He could just play, 2 games and then not play again for the entire season.
Yeah.
But it's a good loop.
I guess with McEntee, he had 80% time on ground in the warm-up game, which means nothing. He played a game last year, so for 3, and suddenly he was priced at 102K, scored 3, and suddenly starts here at 124K, which I think is ridiculous. Why don't we get him at 15K? And Port have the history of trusting rookies when they've got a designated role. And he's got DPP, which opens up the midfield, which there's no other rookies we're really contemplating that allows us to have that swing so early in the year. So M11
I'm taking him over Baldwin now. I'm changing my mind. If he's not.
I'm picking him at this stage, McEntee. Obviously, if he gets named, but yeah, I think it's a good one.
I'd probably have him above Baldwin as well.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mention Stevens because I don't really see him getting named for Geelong. I guess he might and then be the better option. But I find that role, that position in the Geelong side really, really hard to read. You got Francis Evans. You got a whole bunch of fringe.
Yeah, and they're always really clear.
Every year we plead Geelong for play some youth, and it just never happens in the way we want it. So,
I mean, they'd have Duncan out, Menegola coming back, stuff like that. So even if he does play, it just screams like he wouldn't play for very long at all.
Yeah. I feel the same as Will Kelly. I know I didn't mention him on purpose, but I feel like he's the type to get a couple of weeks, Roughhead comes back, and then we never see Will Kelly again for the rest of the season. So that's a strong avoid, and is a bad loophole. At least at least Hoff plays for West Coast, and there's a lot of Sunday games. Collingwood play early, like every week, so you get stuck with a guy that's going to be locked out first. It's a nightmare situation.
Yeah. God, this has been a good chat. I've
Yeah,
really
it's been
enjoyed.
fun. It's been
I've
good.
really enjoyed this. It hasn't felt as long as it is.
That's hour and 45.
I think we've covered everything. Like if you just listen to one podcast for the year and then built a SuperCoach side and we're ready for everyone,
Yeah.
I think we've done a good enough job to get you there. Which wasn't the intention, but kind of a nice side effect of the chat.
Yeah, we got a draft now, guys, or what? No.
Oh, yeah. We were going to do that,
idea is
weren't
out
we?
the window.
I think this has been high value.
All right. I guess what's the exit now? Just click
What's the sign off?
stop and leave the show.
Well, do we do socials? Do we do a hot take? What do you want to do?
You got to plug all your socials. That's how it works, right?
We are terrible at doing this. Like we almost never do it.
It's not a great way to run it.
We fail at.
No, go on. Go plug.
All right. Well, we've got Fantasy Take TV is the Twitter handle. Obviously, George's his YouTube channels where our podcasts go up, as well as all the other platforms that you listen to your podcast to. I'm FTTV at Twitter. JD's Jackson Davey, and that is pretty much it. How about you boys? Sign off.
You can find Chizo at Chizo with a Z _DRSC and Pistol at Pistol _DRSC. And all the negative feedback from today's episode you can send to at JB _DRSC.
Perfect. Well, thanks guys for the chat. It was great. Hopefully we can do a couple catch-up sessions throughout the season, see how we're tracking, maybe convince you guys to get on Hall a little bit quicker than last season. And I think that'd be great.
Oi, you can. You're going to try and claim Ridley as a start and then Hall that you were on before me? No way. And Pistol, I sent you an invite saying like, hey, now we're in Sydney. Can we do some podcasting together? And you just left me on read. That was really weird. So maybe we can solve that next time.
We'll resolve. To be continued.
Cheers, boys. That was great fun.
Got the mojo deals, we been tripping like 80. Pulling out the coupe at the lot.